Okay, so I've just finished week 10, which was looking at certain pathologies for the upper limb. I found it a little bit more difficult compared to the lower limb pathologies, purely because there's so many tissues, there's so much going on, especially even just looking at the shoulder, there's so many things that you could kind of see when you come in the clinic. Looking at how you deal with certain pathologies in, say like a tricky case, is you've just got to kind of go back to the assessment that you looked at initially, take out the big findings from that, and then using the big findings, put that into the first levels of your rehab. So the main things you want to be looking at is getting your range of motion, getting all the tests on the bed, and then looking up to doing more specific things. So say, for example, you've got a tennis elbow, you want to be making sure that you're going through certain movements, going through, I don't know, specifically looking at sagittal plane or frontal plane movements to specifically correct that issue. So that's where your kind of next level thinking comes in as well. But yeah, it was definitely a little bit more advanced than I'd say the lower limb was. But yeah, you've just got to compare it back to the assessment and the big findings that you found when you were doing that. So now I'm going on to week 11, which is end stage return to play. So this is probably the module that I'm most excited about, purely because of my rugby background as well. And it's pretty much more rewarding as well. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you to get the players back to playing as well. So it's quite rewarding when they're at that level, when they can finally get outside and doing some more outdoor activities and stuff as well. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this one. It is, like I said before, it's getting a little bit more busier in the clinic, so it's kind of taking a backseat at the moment, but I'm still powering through it, getting through it week by week like I should be doing as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this week.
So module 11 is all about end stage return to play. So what I want to really hit home for part 1 is what we've actually done up to this point, because it's really important before we get to this point that we've earned the right to be here. And if we've earned the right to be here, we shouldn't run into any problems. And normally in my experience, when people start to run into problems when they get up to this stage, it's normally because we haven't actually earned the right to be here. So to get to this point, we need the basics first. So obviously full range of motion. So that's both with toe touch, extension, your generic objective, and passive range of motion on the bed. We want as much range of motion as possible. And obviously we want as much range of motion as possible for that individual. So even if they do have, post surgeries or whatever, and there's going to be some limitation there, we want as much range of motion as possible back first. We also want intent in all directions on the bed, because if they can't get intent in all directions on the bed, it's very unlikely now when we start to do some change of direction and stuff at speed, at high load, high stress environments, it's going to be very unlikely they can do that successfully if they can't even do it on the bed. So obviously we need that first. Then it's just a graded exposure to both load, speed, and then also volume. We want to do that with slack in and out of the system. So what that means, obviously we talked a little bit about this with the lunge matrix previously, but if I'm going something from here, where I've got a lot of pre-tension in my glute, that's going to be a very different action, whereas if I'm over here and I'm handing off this way, and I've got no pre-tension in my glute now, so I have to use my ankle a lot more. So we want to stress this person in different positions with slack in and out of the system, because it's very, very different for a muscle to produce force where it has to overcome muscle slack compared to when it doesn't. So I hope that kind of makes sense. If not, go back to, I think it was module 7, we talked a little bit about that. So that's very, very important. And especially when we get to this stage, because when we get to this stage now, a lot of the movements we're doing, we're not coaching the midfoot anymore. We're not coaching anything like that, because it all should be happening subconsciously. Because all this stuff now is happening under high stress, high loads, high speeds, where the athlete or the patient hasn't got time to actually think about the movements they're doing. The next thing then is we've done a high level hopping. So especially before we do any sprinting or anything, we want to challenge up the high level hopping. So we're happy with all those progressions so far, Sarah? Yeah, cool. So for module 11 then, the things that we want to add in that we haven't really done loads of yet is the decel. So the decel, and this is where I think a lot of therapists can differentiate themselves from other therapists, because I think this is what a lot of people aren't doing enough of, especially with your MCLs, your ACLs, etc. I think a lot of therapists are really, really good at getting them up to the stage, really, really good at the axle and stuff, but not enough decel. And a lot of injuries, a lot of non-contact injuries especially, happen at sub-maximal loads. So getting the decel is really, really important to make sure that we're able to slow ourselves down. Acceleration obviously is also going to be very important, and obviously for things like your hamstring strains, calf tears, etc. We're going to have to make sure that they can sprint, and obviously we need to make sure they can do that well, because that is some point in their sport when that injury might recur. So especially like a hamstring tear or anything, we need to make sure they can accel, change the direction. And again, we've done a little bit of this already with the previous progressions, but we need to be able to do that at speed and also when there's other demands as well. And obviously specific to the sport, we might need to add in contact as well. Because a lot of what we've done so far with our movements and our perturbations, they're all bottom up. Because obviously if I'm doing a hand driver, for example, that's driving a reaction in my torso, my pelvis, that's a bottom up perturbation, the fact that the only point of contact is my foot. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And it's from the foot up really where those ground reaction forces are going. But if I'm going into contact with somebody, there's going to be a lot of top down perturbations as well. And obviously I need to be able to handle that if my sport is a contact sport. So even if you've got something like an MCL, I need to make sure that MCL is able to take contact and manage those perturbations. If I'm in a tackle with somebody, then I'm able to manage that through my MCL without having any reactions. Okay, so that's the big thing for Module 7. We've done a lot up to this point, and for most patients, to be honest, this might be enough. So like that might be it. Maybe do a little bit of the decel with them, but that might be enough. But especially your athletes or even your patients that are going back playing rugby or football or whatever, we need to make sure that we do the high-end stuff as well.